Hello, everyone. I am Stephen Drew from the Architecture Social, and I have a fantastic guest here all the way around the world. And we originally met when I was incredibly tipsy setting up the Architecture Social community. And we met actually in America, but all the way from Australia. I have the fantastic Sarah Lebner, accomplished architect, community maker, and recently a family. You have a new family as well, Sarah, don't you? So I've seen all the sides.
I sure do. Hello, everyone.
Well, thank you for being here, Sarah, first and foremost. Okay. So for
my pleasure.
Anyone that doesn't know you, do you want to tell us in your own words a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm the principal architect at a multidisciplinary firm in Canberra, Australia, called Lighthouse Architecture and Science. We specialise in energy efficient housing. I was recently awarded the Australian Institute of Architects National Emerging Architect Prize.
Ooh.
And I'm also the author of a book, 101 Things I Didn't Learn in Architecture School and Wish I Had Known Before My First Job, which is also connected to the online platform myfirstarchitecturejob.com and the membership community called the Architect Project, which is a place to help students and graduates bridge that gap between study and practice.
Right, amazing. There's so much good stuff there, and I do think that everyone here should check it out. But let's go back to the bridge. Let's expand upon what I said, because I'm sure there's a few people going, what the hell? You met in America drunk? No. Okay, so Sarah, you were sober because you were halfway through your pregnancy, and we were setting up the Mighty Networks.
Very sober.
Yeah. So, and then we were setting up the Mighty Networks, and at the time, so you were setting up your amazing resource. And for anyone here, basically Sarah walks you through your first job in architecture. You walk through, becoming an architect, all those skills. And I was setting up the Architecture Social, which is kind of a little bit different. It's a little bit like an open platform for people in architecture. So we were on this course, and so we had this fantastic American-style introduction to setting it up. And it was in American time, so you were probably there.
Yes.
Yeah, but it was like
probably like in the morning for me, I think, at 9 o'clock, and then I realized who's this Stephen architect guy, and it was like midnight for you. I think you were watching Pirates of the Caribbean at the same time.
You know what? Good memory. It was actually a Jurassic Park montage, which is very.
Oh.
Yeah. And I had probably a bottle of wine. So when I got there, I was like, "Hey, I just got a question." But yeah, that's been a learning curve. That's definitely been a learning curve. But we met each other from there, and I've been quite impressed with all the stuff you do. So before this, you sent.
Oh, likewise.
Wow. Nah, hang on. You're the real deal as far as I'm concerned. But check this out. So I watched your video before this. Okay. And we'll put a link to it in the podcast if anyone wants to go to it. But I was almost a little bit jealous this morning. So I love London. I'm from London. I've got the noise out there. But, it was interesting seeing you on the farm, on your family's farm, and also seeing you in your architecture practice, which I think is called Lighthouse, isn't it? So tell me a little bit about your roots. So is your background growing up on the farm and then you got inspired to do architecture?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from a very small town called Corryong. It's sort of halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, if anyone knows their Australian geography. It's in the mountains. It's not far from the snowy mountains. We do have some snow in Australia, often surprises some people. And yeah, I'm fourth generation on the farm, and my family are actually returning back to there soon, and I'll be doing the remote regional architecture thing. So I guess I was really influenced by that growing up, particularly when it came to sort of sustainability and passive design, because you just understand that stuff when you grow up in the country. So I primarily became an architect out of an interest to pursue sustainability and improving the world, dealing with climate change, which has led me to through a few different jobs, but landing at that multidisciplinary practice, Lighthouse Architecture and Science, which I'm the principal architect, but it's owned by a building scientist. So
really?
we have scientists and architects working together to, collaboratively optimize and test our homes.
I love that. That's amazing. There's an architecture practice in the UK where called Owen Architects, and I used to work with them on recruitment. And the people that set it up, one was an ex-rugby player for Wales, the other person was a theatre production, and the other founder, again, was a scientist. So yeah, it's an interesting mix.
Really?
Yeah. But I like the work that they did, and so I can see, as you said, it's like that little inspiration kind of really helps, I imagine, right? To get your own identity in terms of Lighthouse, surely.
Yeah, well, we started out, I joined the company when they were Jigsaw Housing, and there were 3 directors then, a builder, a scientist, and an architect. So that's where our roots were in that model, and it was a fantastic model for starting up. But then as the firm grew, long story short, we ended up splitting that model. So splitting with construction just to have architecture and science and working with a range of builders.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, it's really interesting. But so you're working full time at Lighthouse. So you're deep in the trenches. You've got your family, which is fantastic as well. But what I find is, so we're both busy bees, and basically we met because you were setting up the community, which is part of what you do. But let's expand upon, because a lot of the people that listen to this in the UK, they are from the UK, because this is where I'm from, and we've got a lot of people in Europe as well, and some listeners in the USA. But for anyone that's not...
Oh, great.
Yeah. So we're getting there.
And I'm just going to duck down and plug my laptop in, but please keep going. Clearly on the ball, as you can see.
You're still connected, isn't it? but maybe some people are not familiar with I've got your book now, but do you want to tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind the website and everything?
Yeah, sure. And I will just clarify that when I'm not on maternity leave, which I currently am, I've most recently been working 3 days a week. So I think it's important to say that, because I guess our unique business model, where I'm the principal but I'm not the business owner, does allow me to do what I do in a part-time mode. So it is possible. I know a lot of people sort of think you become an architect and you just work the rest of your life. But with some clever business management, you can be part-time. Yes, the book, 100, there it is, 101 Things I Didn't Learn in Architecture School. I guess it seems like such a common experience when we leave our university learning experience. We've spent all this time at university focusing on design thinking, critical thinking, history, culture, all those really worthwhile things. And then I know the model most places around the world is the same, that you're not an architect when you finish university. You are a graduate, and then you have to gain work experience to learn a lot of the practical things. And I'm not necessarily criticizing that model, because it would just be impossible to add all that stuff into university, and what you're learning is so different depending on what sort of sector you're in architecture.
Yeah.
But the problem with it is it means that you go from the rich learning environment of university into a practice where you're learning only the way that one practice does things. You're learning it at a speed of very slow exposure, so only at the speed of every project you're in. Often 90% of what you're doing isn't that exciting learning stuff. Maybe you're just doing graphics or drafting toilets. So the rate at which you learn all of these things is really slow and seems a bit backwards. So that's really been my mission, is to supplement people in those years between getting their first job and hitting graduation, and helping people tick off those goals sooner. And the first step to that was I simply asked a heap of colleagues, what are the things that, really simple, basic things that you wish you'd understood better in your first job. So I guess it goes through, some basic construction things, but also professional development, how some businesses work, different construction terms, all of the things. We did this great list between some friends of the 101 things. And yes, it is a play on the opposite book. You probably know the fantastic book, 101 Things I Learned in Architecture School. So yeah, on purpose there. And look, the feedback has just been incredible. So many people seem to keep the book beside them on the desk. Admittedly, I even keep it on my desk at work, because there's some things I researched that I forget, and I often go back and think, oh, I had that number in the book. So that was step one with the book.
Amazing. So we did the book on the book club here, and so it was really useful. And I do think as well, especially in kind of a busy world, it's good to have a book. What I like is that you've got the 101 things, and you can pick it up and you can read 3 things, and you can put it down, and you can return to it, and you can refer to it. Whereas, as opposed to something which is unruly and difficult to read. But I guess there's one thing as well we have in common, apart from the mighty networks. What I admire is that kind of going out of your way to kind of teach someone maybe the bits that they don't feel very confident on, which helps them with their career. So one of the inspirations behind the Architecture Social was last year, during the time when I was watching Jurassic Park and having wine and setting up the community, but was also that less so about maybe the literal skills that you have in architecture, but what I saw is that you had a lot of people who were leaving university and they didn't really know how to go about getting a job. It was kind of like, hey, you've graduated, congratulations, good luck out there. Or maybe some universities would have 1 or 2 modules, but actually finding a job can be incredibly difficult, especially during a pandemic. And that's kind of like one of the reasons and inspirations that I set it up. But I do get a lot of joy from that as well. It is a lot of hard work. I imagine like your community, to run it's a lot of hard work. Writing a book must be a lot of hard work. But now that you've done it, I mean, what's the response been like to the book and the course and your website?
Yeah, amazing. I guess it's always nerve-wracking to put yourself out there, and I expected that, people might be correcting things or saying, oh, well, I would do it differently, but I haven't actually had any of that. Just a whole lot of thank yous, really, people being grateful that it exists. And I guess the next layer past the book, there's a website with some useful articles, but then with the membership, it's really, we dive a lot deeper into that. I guess it's kind of like coaching and mentoring. I was doing a bit of mentoring one-on-one, but that's very time consuming for me, very expensive for the students and graduates. So I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And that's really what the Architect Project platform is. So it's a more intimate paid community compared to the Architecture Social. And we have sort of weekly content, whether that's guests or little member sessions or little challenges that follow a theme. And it's really focused on all that supplementary material. So we never talk about, design or history or critical thinking, those university things. Yeah. We focus purely on all that stuff that you're learning on the job in those first 5 years. And we do talk about job seeking a bit, because I think you're absolutely right. There's some people just seem to have a knack for finding a job and knowing how to go about it, but a lot of people make really basic mistakes. Yeah. And I think engaging with, a service like you're providing can just probably shave months or years off a job search to help people get a foot in the right direction. And I think one thing I want to say on that is, I think when people are thinking about perhaps doing a course or engaging services on finding a job, they might feel guilty, like they're somehow cheating or presenting false information.
Yeah.
But I always say, not at all. You are showing that you have the resourcefulness to show the best of yourself or to seek out answers to your weaknesses. So I'm really big on people finding solutions to improving their soft skills as well as their technical skills.
That's really interesting way to put it, by the way. I think as well, there's always, and also there's a balance out there, because when you're creating a course like yourself, I think what's successful with it is that, yes, I do one-on-one coaching, and there's a cost to that. And we have to be really open about the cost of things, because you're a professional. You mentioned that you're working part-time, which I really admire, because as you said, the preconception of architecture many years ago was like, whoa, it's full-time. What are you doing? But you can make this balance, but then at the same time, we all want to help everyone. But at the same time, again, things cost, there's an upkeep to doing these things. And you've got, fantastic children, you have a husband, you have a house, these bills need to get paid. And one of the things that I always like to talk about in architecture is, you mentioned as well, this embarrassment of maybe looking for help and all this stuff. But there's also this strange, I used to call it a Britishness, but you can tell me if it's transatlantic or so forth, is that people in architecture are always afraid to talk about money, because it's seen as that's unprofessional, when it's like, no, in my opinion, being a professional is totally okay to talk about money. It's totally okay to talk about your salary. You're going to be charging the client fees. It's really, really important. And I think
exactly.
A big part of being a professional is talking about salaries, and even talking about it with your, future job or your current job. And so many people worry about it. And what I was going to say, and because I want to get your thoughts on this, but where it feeds into the course is that there's so many stuff free online, but how good is the content? And what I've learned is that there's a relationship between time and money. And so when I charge money for something, the upside is that I know the participant is really keen, but then you get a serious hour of your time. But what's interesting about your model is that it's not even transactory based upon the hour. The beauty of the community is that it's this halfway house, right, of you're there a few hours, but people can interact with each other, and in that sense it's great. But also the catches with this thing is it relies on participatory, isn't it? It's like a gym subscription. You gotta go to it, you gotta use it,
you gotta meet halfway. And I think that's it, isn't it? I think we live in a time where you can probably teach yourself anything you want to know on the internet, right? But humans just aren't that kind of animal. we need something that pulls us along, I guess. And a lot of what I've seen in the online education and community space, because when you run these things, Stephen, you follow all these groups of other people that do it, don't you? Because you're trying to work out how to do it well. What I've seen more and more is that really these days it's just all about, help me learn this thing. Hold my hand, put me in a group of people, give me reminders, put it in a format that's going to attract my human brain to engaging with this thing and doing it. And I think that's the benefit of committing to anything like that. And funnily, once we pay for things, we tend to pay them a bit more respect and actually do them and turn up as well.
It's true. I mean, I'm guilty of it as much as anyone, that if I get sometimes a free course at something, or it's I think part of the Mighty Networks was actually, I didn't go to all, because there was a course to make a course, right? And I didn't go to all of them because I had a bit of that naughty boy syndrome, because it was free. I was like, I'll watch a recap and stuff. And actually, what you end up doing is you cheat yourself, right? Because the one or two that I did go to, you get immense value out of it. And I think that it's the same thing. So whenever I get someone interested in coaching, Sarah, the first thing I say is like, are you sure? There's all those resources for free on the Architecture Social YouTube. You get me talking for 50 hours. Like, I'm sure people get bored of my voice or whatever, but I'm like, it's all there. But then with the coaching, I guess, and this is the interesting thing, I think it's also about accountability, isn't it? It's about, like, I think people, as you said, they want
100%.
They want me or you to come across or whoever and be like, how many CVs did you send today? And they're like, oh, 2.
Yeah.
And then you're like, dude, come on, you could do 20.
Yeah.
And that's bizarrely is worth its weight in gold. And the other bit that I was going to say is that what's really easy for me and you is not obvious for other people, and vice versa. So, for instance, it's really hard to, in your career, look at your own CV, your own portfolio, but it's really easy for me, who's got a different perspective, to offer advice. And I imagine it's the same thing with yourself. So for anyone listening, don't be disheartened. That's why you engage with people who are experts in what they do. But, you don't need to be the experts on CVs and portfolios. You need to be the expert in doing you, but you can, see me or you to do that. I mean, what's your kind of thoughts on that theory of things?
Yeah, we actually had Sanaya Norton as our guest in the Architect Project this week. She's a landscape architect and she runs a podcast called Dig Beneath Design, all about design communication. And she had made a fantastic point, because we were talking about how you don't often realize what your communication strengths and weaknesses are, because or any of your strengths and weaknesses, because they do come so naturally to you. And we were talking about the value of just pulling up some friends or colleagues and saying, hey, I know this is a bit weird, but would you mind telling me what you think my strengths and weaknesses are? And I was asking her because we were thinking about, you can then go out and seek to improve those weaknesses. But her interesting point was you should double down on what your strengths are, like an elite athlete would, right? Because that, improving your weaknesses might get your foot through a door or might help you deal with the basics. But honing your strengths is what can really help your skills or career take off. And I think you're doing both when you're engaging in any kind of conscious development like we're talking about. That's
really interesting. I do think there's something in there. And I do think it's good to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. And I used to do it in a roundabout way. So where I worked before. So look, I went from architecture into recruitment, right? Technical detailing was not my strength, right? I hated it, but, right? It's just not for me, okay? I used to love the front end. I used to love doing that stuff. But as a person...
I'd say we're similar on that level.
Okay, well, there you go. Well, look, you've done really well out of it. But for me, in terms of what I do, is that I'm very good at talking, very good at communicating, but I'm not very organized. When you get that list person, that's not me. I've got no list. Yeah. I've got no plan. I've got to generate a business.
Oh, you're making me feel anxious just listening.
yeah. If you like lists, I'm a nightmare, because they're like, what's your plan today? I'm like, I'm going to go with my gut. And they're like, what the hell does that mean?
Oh, no.
Yeah. But then, because of that, I am good at following my gut. I'm good at leading teams and stuff. I always need to work on that balance. However, you're right that because I know I'm not good on organizing, I've got some software somewhere to do stuff. But do you know what? It's like, just embrace what you're good at. It's like that's what I do now. I do a podcast, I do things, but I do have a calendar set up and I do automate things. So this was automated before, Sarah. So I knew you would get an invite. I knew you would get everything, because otherwise, if you put it down to me, I'll forget, mate. So
yeah.
It's a bit of...
You've hacked your own weakness.
Yeah, there's a bit of a balance. But so, look, while you're here, maybe I can get a bit of advice from you. So I do the in-house recruitment for Accra Larry. I run the Architecture Social. I have a few of these ideas, okay? But how do you balance Lighthouse? How do you balance a family? How do you balance the community? And like, you won awards last year, and that's amazing. But how do you balance all this? You got to let me in on the formula, right?
People have been asking me this, and I'm not sure I really know the answer. It's just like, I just do it. So I've been trying to think about this and have hazard a guess at perhaps what some of the answers are. The kind of cop out answer is that you've got to have a good team around you, both in your work and in your family, right? For example, my husband does the grocery shopping and cooks dinner, and point blank, if he didn't do that and I had to do that, architect project would not exist, right? That's an extra hour at least in my day, okay? So that's just a word for a lot of my mum friends I know that are doing absolutely everything. They don't have time to do anything else. And similarly at work, having a great team around you, the fact that Jenny runs the business takes a lot of that business side of things off of me. But that's not to say that I don't get a hell of a lot done, because I think I do. And gosh, what are the tips? I mean, I do write lists. I am organized. I try to automate things. I'm fiercely efficient, especially since having kids. I would say, I have templates, for example, set up for all of the content that goes out on our Instagram, and it literally takes me a couple of minutes every day that I have to post to just put stuff in there. And I think since having children, I've become very decisive in my work, not so much in my personal life, but gosh, I think anyone that has kids is about 20 times more efficient than they were, just because you don't have time to dilly-dally. You just got to delegate and move on. So I'll have to mull on that one a little bit more
mull on it,
as we talk, because there must be other useful things, but I don't know, trying to be organized, working out shortcuts and hacks.
Do you know what I like about that? It's an honest answer, and I did the same, where it's basically you've got all this stuff going on, and I think that there's an element. What's good about doing architecture, we all have that like firefighting ability in us. It's basically like having a few projects on at the go, isn't it?
That's a good idea.
You juggle. Do you know what I mean? You're like, oh, okay, I've got a bit of time here and a bit of time there.
Yeah.
But
delegating. I've become really good at delegating.
Yeah,
you've just got to, as you get better in practice. As you move up in a practice in a firm, you don't have time for what you're being paid and how much work you're managing to sort out, the little annoying things that you could do. But a lot of things come across my desk, and it's like, well, I could sit here for an hour and correct the graphics on this thing, or I could ask someone to do this for me in 2 minutes and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, look, I think that's really well said. What I'd love to explore your thoughts on as well is so that your situation, look, you've got a lot of hard graft, and I admire what you've done, but you've kind of forged that circumstance for yourself, right? Because and you tell me if you agree or disagree, but in architecture before, in recruitment, I'd have many people come up to me and go, I'm looking for a part-time job. And so even 2 years ago, before the pandemic, I'd be like, oh, that's nice. Good for you. I have only full-time jobs. I would love to give you that, but this is what architecture practices are looking for. And I think the idea of an architecture practice before was no, you're in every day. So the pandemic came, and I think it opens up certain opportunities. But where I see, Sarah, the industry going is a little bit of level of flexibility. But now in London, the vibe I get is that people are being encouraged to go back to the office. And I can kind of see that it's really important to have that interface with your team and getting to know each other and working out some issues. But at the same time, we are in this new world now. And I do think that we have to be really upfront about things have changed, right? And so my question or your thought is where do you see your practices in Australia go? Do you think your current circumstance is very unique towards you, or do you see things driving towards the way they were, or will things change a bit?
Yeah, I can tell you where I hope that they would go. And I might step back for a bit, and this will relate. I thought of one more thing that helps to get a lot done in your career is to not try and know it all yourself. I've increasingly recognized the value of collaboration and communication. I know it sounds cliche, but rather than trying to work something else out, pick up the phone, give someone a call, 5 minutes to someone who has that knowledge sorted, rather than sitting down with some manual and reading it for 4 hours. That's a really big one. But that also overlays with where I see practice going and where I think younger generations will take practice. Younger generations, from my observation, really don't hold the same. I'm not sure whether it's ego or just the way we used to think, sort of holding your cards to your chest, and I must be the expert, and I can't tell anyone how I'm doing it. And that's just flipping on its head, I think. We all know that now that a rising tide lifts all boats. So, the more you can share and chat about things and just be generous with everything that all comes back to you tenfold. And I'd like to see, and I don't know how it happens, but I'd like to see education shift more towards this as well, to teach it. But I think flexible, collaborative practice where perhaps we're all sort of knitting into each other rather than these sort of tower models of firms.
Yeah.
Perhaps there'll be more smaller practices and more individuals, and maybe you get together a collaborative project team a bit more just for that project, rather than very static models of this is our firm and this is how we work, and this is the process you will take. And I think the way that we're communicating and getting together during COVID and all the things that's challenged us on is only going to foster and fuel that kind of thinking, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does. It really, really does. I think it's definitely going to be interesting. I do think that there's so many, while coronavirus is awful, of course it's awful, but I think there have been a few, silver linings out of the fact that, and I was speaking to a friend last night, it's kind of like, it's been traumatic for everyone in one sense, but what I like is that we've all gone through it at the same time together, right? So it's not like it's the equivalent of me having like a nervous breakdown on my own. It's that the whole world had a nervous breakdown. And I think
that's so true.
Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, so I was saying like, it's been tough in this regards, and in other areas it's been amazing. But I love
do you know what? One thing that I really love, we see each other much more as humans. I think this is going to do a great thing for practice as well, particularly for parental flexibility, which will primarily benefit women in the profession, in that it will also help partners be flexible and work from home as well. We've all zoomed into each other's home offices and lounge rooms with toddlers and kids and mess and, weird housemates. And suddenly, we're not this sort of stiff person in a corporate outfit at work. We all know that we're human, and we've gotten used to that, and that's okay. I was when I did the National Emerging Architect tour, one of the reps for the sponsors, the window company, AWS, they would sort of chime in at every event and do their sponsor spiel at the start. But this guy joined the whole session from his toddler's bedroom. His wife was unwell, so she was in another room. He did his talk. He attended the whole thing with 2 toddlers running around him and a dog, and he managed bath time, and it was just the most distracting, wonderful thing to watch. But, that was actually a bonus for us to see that, and to see him as a human. And, you know, people have struggled because I don't know what you've had in the UK, but we've had schools shut down. So people are trying to work from home and parent, and just I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but absolute shit show.
Yeah, you can swear. It's the same. It's the same year.
Yeah. And that's just been incredible.
Yeah.
And people have still gotten stuff done, you know, amazingly so. So, we've worked out that people can still be human. You don't have to hide the fact that you're a parent or you've got a sick kid. You're still going to get your stuff done.
Well said. I think that that's the interesting bit, that we've still got stuff done. I did used to manage someone on my team before who had 2 very small children, and he did do his work really well. Although, Sarah, I did feel sorry for him, because it's like, he's got wonderful kids, but I'd ring him up and they'd be like, Daddy! And you're just like, oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Okay. Good luck with that. You know?
I do have a fear that we'll all start working sick from home, because now there's this new pattern of, I'm sick. I'm going to work from home today. And that worries me a little bit. No.
Yeah.
You still got to take the sick day. And I'm not encouraging parenting and working at the same time. You cannot be a parent and a worker at the same time. You're either going to do both poorly, or you got to pick one or the other. But yeah. So don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I think, do you know what? It's really interesting you mentioned about the sickness, but I tell you what, it would be interesting. The one bit I do not have perspective on is how it must feel to be a student right now. On one end, sounds
really true.
Sounds really cool. But then on the other hand, like, I have so many cool memories of going, well, it sounds cool. Maybe I'm romanticizing them a bit, because maybe like, staying up all night and going to the printer and it being jammed was, not a great experience. But there is something nice about, the physical aspect of going to uni, meeting friends, getting drunk but also working really hard. And I do think that students have had it difficult at the moment,
I can't imagine living on my grotty university residence with all the characters in lockdown. Oh my goodness. And I really feel, I've got members in the architect project doing their first and second year, and they haven't attended a class in person, and that really breaks my heart. But, that's why what you're doing and what I'm doing has been a bit of a lifeline in a way, because these students do have somewhere to go and try and replicate some of that. But I think, Stephen, what we will do, hopefully, is mesh the benefits of both. So hopefully people will soon be able to go back to being in classes and collaborating, but we can also take what we've learnt from the benefits of online communities. So, for example, I've had members that, the really clever, proactive members that have reached out to some of the guest speakers after they've been on. That's really clever, asking them for a job and saying, hey, I'm part of the architect project, and I was wondering if, you give me an interview. And they've, because we're a national platform, they've made great connections all around Australia, and a couple of them have ended up getting jobs and moving interstate, and then they've already had some connections. So there's still definitely many benefits to be had for us learning all these online skills when we can, when I say go back, progress into some kind of new normal.
Yeah, I think that what I admire is that anyone that participates, so you're right, especially as we're community makers, right? The Architecture Social, and I'm sure you feel the same, is that these courses and stuff, we were talking about it before as well, they live and breathe and die by participating. But there's something really important in there, because like, if people participate or not in certain things they do in the Architecture Social, I still go to sleep at night, but they are designed for the people. So what I mean is that, like, anyone that's doing the hustle, they win. I loved your story there about people reaching out to the guests afterwards and making a connection. Those are people that get ahead in life. It's just about doing, and being involved. And like, yeah, I don't mind if people go into the social and then, things pop up in life, they do something else. But I think it's just great when people make noise, when people have ideas and then act upon it. It's like there's so many times in the past where I'd have an idea for something and then, I don't know, I just sit on my ass and I didn't do anything. And that's where like the architecture social came from, me wanting to do something in the pandemic. And I'm sure that your book came from, the inspiration that you wanted to do the book. You felt that there was an opening for the book, but writing the book took a lot of bloody work, didn't it? It wasn't easy. I imagine it took a lot of time. And I think that anyone listening, it's about the act of doing. It's like Sana on Scale. She's got so much things going on and she's always doing stuff. And I think like that's inspirational as well. So like, I think
exactly.
It's just doing.
We harp on about our communities here, but really, we're the message is whatever you're getting involved with, you got to do, and it's probably the career advice 101, right? Just be proactive in whatever your interest is. Just get involved. And I heard a great quote once. It said, "All you have to do." To get ahead is be a tiny bit better than the people around you. I always think about that. It's really reassuring. But I think it's the same with proactivity, right? People think, oh, there's all these people around me looking for jobs, but most of them are just sticking to the default, doing minimum effort possible. And if you can just do a little bit more, in whatever you're trying to achieve, that's how you get ahead. What's the other great saying is if you do what you've always done, then you'll get the same results you always have, right?
Yes,
you have to make the change. And that was the theme of my tour, of course, last year was you have to be the change that you want to see. I think I ripped it off Gandhi or something, but it's true.
It's very relevant. It's very, very relevant. And so look, we're at a nice segue now. Okay, and those were wise words, but it's only fair that on this podcast that you get to ask me any question you want live, because it shouldn't be a one-way thing, right? It should be a two-way thing. So Sarah, what would you love to ask me?
This is really interesting. All of my guests that come on the show, I ask them what their number one piece of advice is for young architects, but I'm not going to ask you that because that would be too easy.
Yeah.
When you were a graduate in your first job, what was your biggest fear in terms of your career?
Oh my gosh, right. So I was enamored by the fact I got a job. I was like, I'm so privileged, and I think that I look back and while that's sweet and I was respectful and I think that's very important, it's that I think that I should have like calmed down a bit on that, because I do think that there's an element of everyone's human beings. And while they were amazing to me, I think that if you're too enamored, then I think that where that's dangerous is that I was lucky because my first architecture practice, they were lovely to me. But I do think that if you're enamored, that you feel like, oh, I am super, super lucky to get this job, then I think you can be prone as a graduate to being, that trust is abused. And I do think that, there's a lot of talk right now. It's a very, very healthy conversation about, unpaid jobs. There shouldn't be unpaid jobs and internships and, hours and hours and exploitation. So I do think that, architecture as a culture, the fact that I got a job, I was so grateful for it. And luckily, EPR Architects of Lisbon, they were so good to me. I wasn't asked to work late. They were really respectful. It was so supportive. But I worry that some people could have that attitude and go into another practice and then work long hours and not paid. And, it can leave people prone. So sometimes I think that that's what I look back on. And while it's sweet in my head, I do think I'm a bit more streetwise now. It's like a job is, in my opinion, two ways. You should be grateful that you've got the opportunity, but then also you should always be thinking about what is a fair salary, what is good experience, is this going to help me with my part 3, is there career growth here, is my boss being respectful of my time as well. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good.
That was
my
right,
partner
wasn't it?
would say, my partner would say, on one side of the coin, you are always replaceable. That's the sort of being a little bit humble about your job. But on the other side of the coin, he would also equally harshly say, you got to take care of yourself because no one else will.
Yeah. Well, it's
harsh thoughts,
true.
but good to keep in the back of your mind.
It is true, and I've also done the other mistake as well, where I read another quote. I think it was on Reddit, because sometimes I go on Reddit, and it was the same thing about. I think that what's interesting is most people feel really indebted to their companies, but just so you know, the company probably doesn't feel quite the same about you, and you are easily replaceable. And you have to realize that sometimes, even though the company can love you, architecture, we're a little bit like the canary in the mines. And if that big project drops out, and even though you're the key person, Sarah, it's like, hey, there's no projects in, and you can be put at a place of risk. So you always have to keep that in mind. And I think that it comes, we're looping back to a little bit about what we talked about earlier. Part of being a professional is talking about your role, your responsibility, and your salary, and it's all about where your career is going. And I think that when you have that mind frame, then if, for instance, a project's pulled, then, you're in that tricky situation, you won't feel so shaken up. Because I remember that when I got made redundant before, and I was hurt. I was really hurt, and it caught me out. And now, having done recruitment for a while and seen lots of people go through this, it's very normal. Redundancy in architecture is not like you failed. It means that either a project's lost or things can happen. So I think you're right. So Sarah, unless have you got one more question for me before we go?
Oh, on the spot. What's next for the Architecture Social?
Good question.
Or what's your dream for it?
Oh, that's hard, man. So Accurate Larry, where I work, they're helping me with the Architecture Social as non-equity directors. And so they asked me why, and it was fucking difficult, right? Why? Do you know what I mean? Like, we get caught in the process of how. I've got the mighty networks. We've got the website. We've got people that are interested in this. That's how. But why? Why is really difficult. And so I spent the last 2 weeks thinking about why, mate. I was like, why am I doing all this? And like, my theory, but it's hard, isn't it? Because you get caught in the middle of it, and you're like, why did I do this? And so I have to like loop back, and like, so my drive, and remember, it was always like this on the Mighty Networks as well. It's like, what's your mission? How are you going to relate to people? And like, I've got to be real about who I am. And it's like, I've done architecture, I've done recruitment. Finding jobs in architecture is fucking hard, okay? And also, finding people for your team is difficult. Recruitment is difficult. And I think that if in the Architecture Social, companies and, job seekers, talented people can interact with each other, and again, it goes back to that theme we talk about of engagement, I think that's the why, because I think that LinkedIn, it's a great platform, but it's a bit siloed. But my mission is more about getting those companies and employers and employees together. So that's the why. How it shapes up and how it evolves will be interesting, and I think that I would like to not have it all digital, Sarah. I'd like a physical aspect to it, because I think that the hybrid will win in the future. So, I would like to see it being like an office or a hangout space with the forum, with things. And I think that's where I want to take it, is a mishmash,
I've just had $1 million idea for you, Stephen. You need to make Tinder for architects.
Oh my God, you know how brutal that is? This guy's like, nope, nope, no Reddit. Nope. Wow.
Maybe
I tell you
it
what,
would work.
one day maybe. But thank you. On that note, Sarah,
Can I finish off, Stephen? Can I just
Yes.
do a quick plug? There's a brilliant series we've just published on our website, myfirstarchitecturejob.com, called Breaking into Architecture. Really quick, punchy articles from a range of architects on their career advice about getting started. And just there's something for everyone in there. So head to our articles to find those.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Let's see the website, Sarah. What is the website before you go? Where would you find that?
It is myfirstarchitecturejob.com.
Brilliant. You can connect with Sarah on Instagram, on LinkedIn. On that note, we're going to go now. Sarah, stay on the line with this podcast updates. People reach out to you online, and thank you very much.
Thank you.